This is the Cowboy Up Podcast bonus program. Hey, it's me. My name is Stan, and you may have heard me mention before, I'm the producer of the Cowboy Up Podcast. The Cowboy Spirit USA is the name of the company that I lead, and it's always my privilege and my pleasure to bring you that program. And we're glad we can do just that. But you know, we oftentimes say, wouldn't it be nice if we could have a little bonus from time to time to help you keep the cowboy flavor going in your life. And since this is the very last day of Poetry Month, during April we actually had one of the top, Doris Daly, the cowboy woman poet, the Western woman poet, and she was wonderful. But then we served and heard that, what you need? You need Rod Miller. And of course, we'd heard of him, but we chose Doris. But then we said, let's do Rod as a bonus. So, Rod, you're the bonus. How about that?
Well, I'm happy to be here under any circumstances, Stan.
Right. This side of the grass, the whole deal, right?
Yep, that's the thing.
As one of my friends, when I used to say, it's good to see you, and his comment was, well, it's kind of good to be seen.
Yeah, it's sometimes better be seen than viewed.
That's right. Well, here's what I'd like to do. Rod, first of all, for those who may not know you, give yourself a little bit. I know it's kind of hard for a cowboy with a little modesty in you, but give us a little promo pitch about who you are and what you do.
Well, I'm just kind of an ordinary guy. Grew up in a really small town in Utah. Grew up in a cowboy family. We always had horses and cattle and worked with my dad on that. My dad was a working cowboy for most of his adult life. So I had all the experience that you could ask for to become a cowboy, and I did all that kind of work, but I wasn't all that good at it. So I went off to college and learned how to be a writer and worked for a while in broadcasting, and then spent most of my working years working in advertising agencies as a copywriter. And then somewhere along the way, when I was probably about 20 years into that kind of work, and I woke up one morning and I wondered if I could write a poem. And having grown up a cowboy and having been a big fan of cowboy poetry, of course, that was the direction I went, and I started trying to write some poems and ended up being published in American Cowboy magazine and had some stuff published in Western Horseman magazine and Range magazine. Some other publications were around at the time that published poetry. There weren't very many of them, but I managed to get my work out there. And then I realized one day that I really didn't know what I was doing. So I kind of launched a homeschooling effort to teach myself about poetry and read a bunch of classic poetry and read a lot of cowboy poetry and kind of some books and some things on how poetry works, and tried to teach myself all the literary techniques that are involved in it, what makes a poem and that sort of thing. And so I've been doing that ever since, and I've written lots of poems over the years, and since then I've also written short stories and novels and some history books and had my fingers in all kinds of things. I just kind of figure I'll keep at it, and one of these times I'll find something I'm good at.
Well, he is good at a lot of things. He is truly, as I say, he's not only a rancher, he's a Renaissance man, and I am overwhelmed by some of the things as I've learned what he has been able to do. So I just want to tell you that I'm grateful that you will be on the program, on this bonus program, and I'm so looking forward to. We're gonna read. We're gonna at least go 3 poems, okay?
All right.
We've talked about this. This is particularly from your book called "Things a Cowboy Sees," and I loved it. I started to read it out loud, and my wife was listening to me, and she said, "You really like that stuff, don't you?" I says, "It really moves me." And so what we'd like to do, let's try this. Give me permission to read the poem, and then would you tell the story behind it, all right?
Sounds great.
Sounds fun. Okay, let's go. Things a Cowboy Sees by Rod Miller. Hung up on the jagged peaks, the sun begins the day, breaks loose and climbs the morning sky, burning night's cold away. The horse 'tween your knees snorts the cool air, hops and kicks at the blue, but you don't mind. He's just glad to be alive, and today you kind of feel that way too. Cows abandon the watering hole, in single file they march away, up the worn trail toward the hills as giddy calves, they buck and they play. Then, like a frayed old catch rope, the trail begins to unravel. The cows separate as the track unbraids, each choosing a strand to travel. Ahead, a meadowlark flops around, wing wobbling like a broken dry stick. She takes to the air as you ride near, lands, and then repeats her trick. The patch burnt by last summer's lightning, just beyond the Saddleback Pass, is rising like phoenix from the ashes, haired over by tender green grass. That 3-legged coyote's in the meadow, a field mouse trapped between her paws. Its tail in her teeth, she tosses it high and catches it with a snap of her jaws. She ambles away in her own good time, like she doesn't even know you're there, then glances back with a look that says she knows, but she doesn't care. Well, you put aside those overdue bills, and the blanket, and the banker you can't seem to please, blinded for a while to life's burdens by the things a cowboy sees. And can I just make a little comment? That led me to do a little program just entitled They're Seen and Unseen, and so what some people don't see, you do see. And I love that poem. But now you tell me the story, Rod, okay?
Okay, well, thank you, Stan. It's a great job reading that, much better than I would do. The thing that I was thinking about in writing that poem, I read one time that a good poem is always about at least 2 things. There's the story of the poem, there's what it says, and then there are all these underlying kind of meanings and implications to it. And so that was kind of on my mind as I wrote this. It's on its surface, it's about a guy riding out to do his day's work and the things he sees that make him glad to be a cowboy. You really get a good look at nature and God's handiwork and all the things that are out there in the beautiful world, and you're right out there amongst them. So that's kind of what the poem talks about. But I think under the surface, it also speaks a little bit about kind of the tentative nature of life and the contrasts there are in everything. He's on his horse and he loves this horse, but tries to buck him off in the morning. The cattle, they go to marching away from the water hole and up into the hills where they're going to hide out for the day with their calves. At some point, you're probably going to have to ride up there and find them and get them back out of there. And so there are things like that. The meadowlark, the birds that you see, and even the meadowlark's trying to fool him. it tricks him into thinking it's injured to lead him away from her nest. And it just keeps doing that to protect her young. And then there's a place where there was a fire, lightning burned off part of the pasture where they feed the cows, and it's coming back. It's rebirth. It's like Phoenix rising from the ashes, and the grass is growing again. And then the coyote, it's a three-legged coyote, so obviously somebody tried to catch it one time, and they caught it, but the coyote was having nothing to do with it, chewed off her leg and went back about her business. And now she's still out there. She knows you don't like her. She knows you don't want her around, but she doesn't care. She just goes about her business and does what a coyote does. And then it ends with the part about the overdue bills and the banker you can't seem to please. Being out in nature, you can put those things aside. They're blinded for a while to life's burdens by the things a cowboy sees. But those burdens are still there, and they're not going to go away, but you do get to set them aside for a while and just enjoy what's out there.
That explains so much more. I mean, yes, I began to feel that, but what I had this feeling, Rod, is that all this thing about the pandemic and the COVID and the lockdown, as someone once said, when things are bad, the worst thing you can do is stay in the house. Get out and explore nature and get out and see it. And now we're learning that was probably the safest thing to do, was to get out.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we did that, my family.
Yes.
Doing the work I've done, I've had to live in cities and towns all my adult life. But when we were shut down with the pandemic, my wife got this bug to go hiking once a week. And we'd gather up our kids and our grandkids. And here where we live, we're just 2 miles away from the mountains and some beautiful hiking trails. And we can get out and get up there and hike around in the cool air and just really enjoy nature and one another's company. And so the pandemic has been tough, but it's had its good sides too.
Very much so. And again, I saw all those wonderful images. Yeah, the bills are still there, but it's so nice to take a little bit of the God-given air and the characters he's created. We literally the other day, I just enjoyed it. I was out there and the quail, which we told mate for life. There were 3 pair enjoying being in my backyard, obviously looking for a place to do a little nesting. And I just wanted to say, you can stay here. You can stay here. And then, of course, a little bobcat came and looked at them, and they ran away. And he just said, okay, I'll let them go. It's wonderful. Well, that's good. Oh, now, you who've heard this, you think about that. Now, you, as I often said, a late-night radio, Rod, just kind of let that poem sit on your head for a while, all right? Here's another one. Here, I love this one. And again, there's a story behind that, I guess. Morning glory. Stars punch holes in the dark, and the moon curls on the sky like a hoof paring from a soft-footed horse, while razor-edged peaks stand against the ribbon of dawn, a dike holding the morning from its course. Atop long ridge we squat, and sit, and roll, and spit. Lies hang in the air, drifting like powder smoke from round after round of bullshot. Sparks glint when steel shoes clang impatient against stone. Scrub oak materializes deliberately out of the dim, and quakies on the ridge appear. Stirrup fenders slap saddle seats. Latigos slide, cinches taut. A final brim tug and a chap buckle snug, and my rear meets leather. A hesitant sun greets the crew. Light crawls slow where today's gather will take us, away from Long Ridge and our dark climb. You know what? I glory in our 40 minutes there. Glad we arrived too early in the day, or maybe late at night, to get to work on time. Morning Glory by Rod Miller.
Thank you, Stan. Appreciate your interpretation of that. It's wonderful.
Well, tell us the story.
Well, one thing I need to do, it's a cowboy thing. Down in third stanza of that, it says, stirrup fender, slap saddle seats, latigos.
Latigos.
Latigo is a strap that hooks used to tie the cinch to the saddle with. So that's a latigo.
Okay.
That's what that is. So not that it matters. That's something that a lot of cowboys, I think, can relate to this poem, because there's this cowboy thing, and I don't understand it. I've never understood it, because I've never been afraid to stay in bed. But when you're doing cowboy work, there's this thing where you've got to, if you're on time, you're late. And so you've always got to be early. And so every job you've got to do, you show up early, and then you hang around and wait until there's enough light that you can actually go to work. And like I said, I don't know why that is, but it's a pretty common thing. So that's what inspired that poem. And then it's, again, like Things a Cowboy Sees, it just talks about a lot of the things that you see and experience when you're doing cowboy work. And the thing about this poem that makes it different than a lot of traditional kinds of cowboy poems is that it's free verse, meaning it has no meter. Now, most free verse poetry doesn't rhyme, but this poem has a very strict rhyme scheme, and in each stanza it has an ABC rhyme pattern. So it rhymes, but since it's not metered, the rhymes are kind of not really noticeable. And that's been free verse poetry's been something of a controversy in cowboy poetry over the years. There are a lot of great cowboy poets, some of the best cowboy poets who write free verse poetry. And there are a bunch of other great cowboy poets who try to stick pretty close to rhyme and meter. And so this poem is, there are cowboy poets I know who wouldn't even consider that poetry because it's not metered. Most of these people, unfortunately, don't really know the difference between free verse poetry and what makes it free verse.
But they have an opinion anyhow.
They sure do, and that's an argument, I guess, for another day. Okay. But it uses some literary techniques that I picked up, some poetic things. There's enjambment and there's caesura that kind of shifts your pauses around. And most metered poetry of the cowboy type has very definite end stops and end rhymes. So the rhymes are very deliberate and they jump right out and they grab you. This one, they're really gentle and you don't really hear them right off, but they're there, and those little echoes will sound throughout the poem.
Yes. So
that's kind of what I was doing when I wrote this poem. I tried to kind of do it a little bit different way.
I loved it. And now that you've helped me see it, I can even enjoy it a little bit more. Sometimes knowing a little bit of how the artist is working can really help you, whatever art you're involved in, to know what's going on. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
hey,
one other little cowboy thing that's in that poem, it says, the moon curls on the sky like a hoof paring from a soft-footed horse. Farriers will tell you, and most people who ride horses will tell you that horses with light-colored hooves, their hooves are softer than the hooves that are dark.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, and so, I just imagined that, and a hoof paring kind of has the shape of a crescent moon.
Yes.
And since it was a soft-footed horse, it's light in color. So that was just an image that I thought was kind of something, that sounded kind of neat.
Well, whenever I'm out at the ranch, White Stallion, where we go and record the program, I've never noticed that the fact that horses might have different colored hooves, but now I will.
Yeah, they do. Most horses, they're dark, but Appaloosas tend to have lighter colored hooves and sometimes multicolored stripes. So it's, neither here nor there, but interesting to me.
Well, interesting is always interesting to me. Hey, my friends, you are in tune to a bonus edition of the Cowboy Up Podcast. My name is Stan Houston. I'm the producer. I'm usually behind the scenes, but occasionally they let me out in front and do a microphone shot, and that's what I'm getting to do today with Rod Miller, who's our end of the month poet for Poetry Month, and we are enjoying not only his poetry, but his stories. Good poems and good stories. What a wonderful way to do part of your day. And please keep in touch with us and keep in tune with Rod. Now, Rod, you get to do a little, because this is our little break before we kind of start doing our last two poems. Do a little pitch for yourself. I know you're kind of humble, but of course, some people right now are saying, where can I find out more about this cowboy poet? Tell them where they can reach you and maybe even support you and buy something good from you, okay?
Well, sure. This is what the guys on NPR, the Click and Clack, used to call the Shameless Commerce Division.
That's right. That's exactly right.
I have a website. You can find me online at writerrodmiller.com. And on there are pages for my poems and pages for my novels and short stories and my nonfiction. And tells you more than anyone could possibly ever want to know about me. But it also provides links to places where you can buy the books if you're so inclined. Most all of them are available from Amazon or other online sellers, and they're also available through the publishers. And you can find them all at writerrodmiller.com.
And go right there, and I do know that just the very description of a few of those books will get you saying, I should buy that. And you're not sure if you want to or can afford to right now, but you say, I'll come back and look at that.
Absolutely.
Good. Well, what I'd like to do today is, we got about 10 more minutes left. Is that okay?
Yes.
Well, this one caught me because it was a surprising with the ending, but it is so much like life. I mean, because I not only what I may fear, but also what I experienced in my own life. So, can I do no enjoyment in unemployment?
Yes, please do. This is a little bit different.
Yes, it is. No enjoyment in unemployment. His staples won't stick to fence posts, nor his brands to a slick calf's hide. And I'm weary of hearing his lying boasts about the rank bunks that he can ride. He never remembers to pack a lunch, and he's forever bumming a smoke. His turn to buy a round for the bunch somehow always finds him broke. His loops won't fit over a critter's head, nor can they find their way to a hock. He often gets lost right here on the spread when sent out to gather stock. The calves he castrates get infection. The hay bales turn to mold. Colts he schools all need correction if we hope to get them sold. His saddle horses are cinch-galled with sore backs and withers fistulous. His lasso rope is so twisted and balled and kinked and knotted, it's ridiculous. His tack is always in disrepair. Horseshoes he nails on, they never fit. Compare his saddle to his easy chair, and you'll see where he'd rather sit. The chaps he borrowed have gone astray. The spurs I loaned him, they're missing too. and I have to follow him around every day to do the jobs that he forgets to do. I guess you can see why I had to let him go. He's the sorriest hand I ever had. But still, I just help feeling low about giving the sack to my dad. And I laughed, but then I remembered about my own father and some of his failings as he suffered dementia later in his life. Boy, this struck me. Tell me the story.
Well, I didn't take that nearly as seriously as you did, I can, Dan. It was something a little different that inspired that. You know, when a rancher has to hire a cowboy, there are usually two kinds. The people who want the job kind of get divided into two categories. And one of them is real humble and claims he really ain't much of a hand, and you could give him a try, but you probably won't like him. And that guy turns out to be a liar because he's the best hand you've ever seen.
Okay,
do
sure.
Everything, does it well, just quiet and goes about his work. And then there's the other kind who, they're all bluster and BS, and they can do anything, and they've done everything, and they've done it better than anybody else, and they're just all brag, and boast. And maybe they can do it, but maybe they can't. And in this case, we don't know who this guy is throughout the poem. The narrator's just telling us that, how bad he is at his job.
Yes.
And it turns out at the end that, he had to let him go, but my gosh, I felt pretty bad because he's my dad.
Yes.
And he probably, taught this guy everything he knew. So it's just, kind of looking for a twist at the end. But the thing about that poem that I think is probably history-making is I don't think there is another cowboy poem in all the world that even attempts to rhyme the word fistulous.
Yes. Tell us about fistulous.
Yeah, it's a medical condition that horses will get if the tree on your saddle gets broken or some other malady occurs. They get what's called fistulous withers, which is just a big nasty gaping sore on their withers that's really hard to heal if you can ever get it healed. So fistulous withers is something that's not common, but when it happens it's pretty bad. But like I say, trying to rhyme fistulous is perhaps not the easiest thing in the world, and I don't know if anyone else has ever tried it, but I did, and I think I pulled it off with ridiculous. So there you have it.
You got it.
History in the making.
And you heard it right here.
Yeah.
Nowhere else in the whole world will you ever hear that explanation. Okay. Well, like I said, and I also struck because, as I said, it did strike me because I watched my father, kind of fail as a result of a series of strokes until, I had that terrible time where, I had to say to him, Dad, you're going to go in the nursing home now. Mom can't take care of you. And he looked up at me as if I can't do that, and that was that kind of brought that feeling back to me. But I was kind of said, well, Dad, you can't even take care of Mom anymore, and that was hard. That was really hard. So
yeah, and there are people I think that will interpret that poem without the levity that I meant, and I guess it's still somehow, it rings true to them in another way. I know in the foreword to my second poetry book, my second collection of poetry called Goodnight Goes Riding and Other Poems, the former editor of Western Horseman magazine, who went on to edit another publication called Ranch and Riata magazine, a gentleman named A.J. Mangum, who I became good friends with over the years. He published a lot of my poems, and then I wrote a whole bunch of magazine articles for him when he was doing Ranch and Riata. He wrote the foreword to that book, and in that foreword, he tells a story about a reader at Western Horseman who read this poem in the magazine when it was published. He saw it more, I guess, the way you did, but even in a more extreme way. He just thought it was awful that I would make fun of old people. And it just offended him to no end. And I didn't even know about this. I mean, I didn't find out about it till A.J. wrote that foreword. But it certainly wasn't meant in that spirit, although I can see how people could see that. But this guy was really mad, and A.J. pointed out, well, it's a poem. It's not an article.
That's right.
It's not real. It's a made-up story. But as I say, poems can be interpreted different ways by different people. But, gee, I thought it was kind of a hoot that this guy had to, this sorry hand turned out to be his dad. Had to get rid of him. Had to fire him. But I guess to some people it's not funny.
Well, what I've discovered, as I oftentimes say in my teaching and coaching through the years, particularly in broadcasting, storytelling is the only effective means of communication. I use the line in my own work. I say, the master teacher, Jesus, came into the world and he told stories and asked questions. So what do? We preach sermons and give answers. Maybe we should try the old-fashioned way. Ask questions and tell stories. And the magic of the story is you don't need to do audience research, because a good story, the listener will interpret it in the way that matches his story. And so you never know how it'll turn out. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And, a great cowboy poet named Paul Zarzyski once told me that when it comes to storytelling, or when you want to say something, says if you want to send a message, write a letter or send a telegram, because poems are meant to work on a different level.
That's right.
And they should. And another thing, I think all good writing, like the stories you mentioned that Jesus told, they ask questions rather than give you answers. So if you walk away from a poem or a story or a book a little bit troubled maybe and a little bit thoughtful and with a question in your mind that you're trying to answer, then I think the writer's done his job.
Absolutely. It's beautiful stuff. As I've said that before, is if you if you want to communicate, talk. If you just want to send information, email, and don't get them mixed up. Hey, we gotta go, but we're gonna do the last poem here because I want you to finish up on this one. This is Why I'm Not a Roper. All right?
Okay.
All right. Give me a twine, and I'll do just fine. At building a loop and spinning, jumping out of the saddle and flanking cattle for wrapping and half-hitching. The problem I've seen comes in between, and it's bothered me forever. I can rope, of course, or ride the horse. But I can't do both together. I love it. Tell me the story, and we'll go out on that.
Okay, well, that's kind of indicative of my cowboy skill there, I guess. My dad was a really good roper, and my brother was a really good roper, and I could catch a cow if it was sick enough and didn't try too hard to get away. But, a lot of cowboy work takes a lot of skill.
That's right.
And spinning a rope and throwing it and catching something's hard enough, and doing that while you're riding a horse which is a skill in itself to get a horse pounding out through the brush. Just staying aboard can be a job, but real good cowboys can do that, in their sleep. But being a sorry kind of roper and a sorry kind of cowboy all around, I was just never good enough to do that kind of stuff. So, I can rope or I can ride, but doing them both at the same time is a little bit beyond my ability.
And you just say it and confess it and say, that's the way it is, and I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a pleasure. By the way, I would request that perhaps maybe we do this again from time to time. The book, Things a Cowboy Sees, is the one I've been working with. And then I've got the other one, the Good Night book. I'm getting ready to do that too. So perhaps we'll do this again with another book, and we'll see where this leads. As I say, one of my great mentor teachers always said, he said, class, did you notice that when I put things together here, I always call them an experiment? I don't call them a demonstration, because it might not work out. So it's just an experiment.
We'll hope for the best.
And we hope for the best. Well, this has been an experiment, and it's been delightful to me, and I trust it's been that for you, Rod. And I do know that for many of our listeners, they will get back to me and they will say, as I love to hear, do it again, Stan. Do it again. And maybe we'll do just that. Hey, all the best and blessings to you. Happy trails to you. My favorite song, Ride On and Be Safe. And why don't you all come back sometime, okay?